Welcome back to the Great Indian AI podcast channel. Today, we're diving deep into the story of Cyclone Amphan,
Okay.
a powerful storm that hit eastern India and Bangladesh back in May 2020.
Yeah.
You've sent in some really interesting articles about it, and we're here to help you unpack all the key information.
What's fascinating about Amphan is that it really pushed the limits of disaster preparedness.
Right.
It wasn't just the cyclone itself, but the fact that it hit during the COVID-19 pandemic,
Oh, wow.
which created this whole other layer of challenges.
Yes, a double whammy.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we get into the nitty-gritty, can you give us a quick overview?
Sure.
What made Amphan so significant?
Well, for starters, Amphan went from a relatively unassuming low-pressure system to a full-blown super cyclone in a shockingly short amount of time.
I'm looking at this timeline from one of the articles, and it seems like that jump happened within days.
Right.
What caused such rapid intensification?
The Bay of Bengal, with its unusually warm sea surface temperatures at the time, acted like a giant fuel tank.
Oh.
These warmer waters essentially supercharged the storm's development.
Wow.
It's a phenomenon we're seeing more and more as the climate changes.
That's a worrying trend.
Yeah.
And I remember reading that the India Meteorological Department, the IMD, declared Amphan the first supercyclonic storm in the Bay of Bengal since the devastating 1999 Odisha cyclone.
All right.
So we're talking about a truly historic event here.
Absolutely. And with a storm of this magnitude brewing,
Yeah.
both India and Bangladesh had to scramble to prepare.
Right.
They were facing the daunting task of evacuating millions.
Wow.
While simultaneously dealing with a pandemic.
Oh my gosh.
Can you imagine the logistical nightmare?
Over 4 million people evacuated with a pandemic raging that blows my mind.
It's hard to fathom.
Where do you even put that many people?
That's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
They had to get creative.
Authorities ended up repurposing schools, mosques, and community centers as additional shelters.
Wow.
They even had to figure out ways to maintain social distancing in these already crowded spaces.
So social distancing in a cyclone shelter, that must have been a challenge and a half.
It was a monumental task.
Did these innovative approaches work?
Well, any loss of life is tragic, but considering the scale of this storm and the added complexities of the pandemic, the fact that they managed to evacuate so many people is quite remarkable.
It's a testament to human ingenuity in the face of overwhelming odds.
It truly is.
Yeah.
Now, Amphan made landfall in West Bengal, and that's where it really unleashed its fury.
I read that the storm surge reached a staggering 5 meters high.
It was an incredible surge.
That's like a 2-story building being submerged underwater.
You can just imagine the force of that water.
Yeah.
This surge inundated vast coastal areas, including the fragile Sundarbans mangrove ecosystem.
All right.
Kolkata, the state capital, experienced wind speeds up to 190 kilometers per hour.
Hurricane-force winds ripping through a major city.
It was a scene of utter devastation.
The images from that time are just devastating.
It's hard to comprehend the scale of the damage.
What about the impact on people's livelihoods? I know agriculture is a huge part of life in that region.
The agricultural damage was immense.
Yeah.
We're talking about 88,000 hectares of rice paddies and 200,000 hectares of other vital crops completely wiped out.
Oh my goodness.
Imagine the impact on the local communities that rely on these crops.
It's a stark reminder of just how vulnerable we are to the forces of nature.
It's a humbling experience.
While we've been focusing on West Bengal,
Right.
Amphan also had a significant impact on Odisha,
Yes,
the state just north.
absolutely.
Oh, right.
Mm.
Odisha's no stranger to cyclones. In fact, they've become quite well known for their disaster preparedness.
That's true.
Exactly. And while Odisha did experience damage from Amphan, it's a fascinating case study. In resilience, they actually fared better than many expected.
They did.
That's intriguing. So what did they do differently? What made them more resilient this time around?
Well, Odisha has learned a lot from past cyclones.
Yeah.
Instead of mass evacuations,
Yeah.
they implemented a more targeted approach,
Okay.
focusing on the most vulnerable areas.
I see.
This made the evacuation process much more efficient.
So a more strategic and focused approach. I like that it sounds like they really took a data-driven approach to disaster management.
They did.
And they also strategically deployed disaster response teams to ensure swift action.
That's right.
It was a combination of smart planning and quick execution.
Exactly.
So Odisha's experience really highlights how crucial preparedness is. But it's important to remember that they weren't completely unscathed.
Right. They still faced significant challenges.
Right.
Amphan damaged power infrastructure, leaving millions without electricity.
Wow.
And saltwater inundation rendered vast swaths of agricultural land unusable.
Oh, no.
Even with the best preparation, nature's power can be overwhelming.
It's a sobering thought, and we can't forget that the impacts of a cyclone like this extend far beyond the immediate landfall area.
You're absolutely right.
Really? So what kind of impacts did southern India experience?
Well, Kerala, known for its picturesque coastline, faced significant coastal erosion.
Oh, wow.
Imagine the impact on the tourism industry there,
Right.
which relies heavily on its beautiful beaches.
Right, that's a major concern, and this is all from a storm that didn't even directly hit them.
It is. Amphan's strong winds also damaged numerous fishing boats in Tamil Nadu,
Wow.
disrupting livelihoods and potentially causing economic setbacks.
And it gets even more interesting. I read that Amphan actually contributed to heat wave conditions in parts of southern India. How does a cyclone, a storm associated with heavy rain and wind, lead to hotter temperatures?
It sounds counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
Well, as Amphan moved across the Bay of Bengal, it sucked up an enormous amount of moisture,
Oh, wow.
effectively depleting it from the atmosphere over southern India. This lack of moisture led to drier conditions, and as a result, a spike in temperatures.
Wow. So Amphan's reach went far beyond its direct path. It's like a domino effect across the entire region.
Precisely, it's a stark reminder that natural disasters have complex and far-reaching consequences.
This is fascinating stuff, folks, and we're just getting started. Make sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe to the Great Indian AI podcast channel so you don't miss a single episode. Now let's shift our attention to Bangladesh, a nation that's sadly no stranger to powerful cyclones.
Yes, Bangladesh was bracing for the worst.
Oh, no.
Many feared Amphan could become the deadliest storm since Cyclone Sidr ravaged the country back in 2007.
Cyclone Sidr was catastrophic. The images of the devastation were heartbreaking. Did Amphan reach that level of intensity in Bangladesh?
Thankfully, it didn't, but the impacts were still severe.
So what exactly happened when Amphan hit Bangladesh? What were the major consequences there?
Well, even though the storm surge wasn't as high as in West Bengal, it still caused extensive damage. It led to numerous embankment breaches,
Oh, no.
which resulted in widespread flooding.
Flooding in a region like Bangladesh with its low-lying delta geography must have been terrifying.
It was a dire situation. Countless homes and vital infrastructure were destroyed. Oh my gosh.
The Sundarbans mangrove forests, which play such a crucial role in protecting the coastline,
Right.
suffered significant damage yet again.
That's like a double blow for the Sundarbans, hit hard by the storm surge in both India and Bangladesh.
Exactly, and the Sundarbans are so vital for biodiversity and coastal protection beyond the ecological damage. Amphan also dealt a heavy blow to the fishing industry in Bangladesh, with losses estimated in the millions of dollars.
That's heartbreaking. Fishing is a lifeline for so many communities in Bangladesh.
It is, and to make matters worse, mango production, a key agricultural sector in Bangladesh, was also severely affected.
So it sounds like Amphan had a multifaceted impact on Bangladesh, affecting the environment, livelihoods, and the economy. It really paints a picture of the cascading effects of these extreme weather events.
Yes, it does, but amidst all this devastation, it's important to remember that there were also incredible relief efforts in both India and Bangladesh.
You're right. Let's talk about those efforts. How did the governments and communities respond to the crisis? Both governments immediately mobilized resources to support the affected regions in India. Prime Minister Modi conducted an aerial survey to assess the damage.
Wow.
A powerful symbol of leadership during a crisis.
Right.
The Indian government also announced substantial relief packages to aid West Bengal and Odisha.
That's good to hear. And what about Bangladesh? What steps did they take?
The Bangladeshi government also allocated significant funds to repair damaged embankments and provide aid to the hardest hit districts. They focused on distributing essential supplies like food, clean water, and corrugated tin sheets for shelter.
So a swift and coordinated response from both governments, but I imagine the pandemic added a whole other layer of complexity to these relief efforts.
Absolutely. The pandemic created a double burden, stretching resources thin and making the task of providing aid even more challenging.
Yeah.
It's a situation we haven't really seen before, managing a natural disaster of this scale during a global pandemic.
That's a sobering thought. It really underscores the importance of constantly adapting our disaster response strategies to account for evolving threats.
It does, and it also raises a crucial question. What are the long-term implications of a disaster like this?
Right.
Especially in a world increasingly affected by climate change.
That's a question we need to grapple with. And
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're out of time for this segment of the show.
Okay.
But don't worry, folks. This deep dive isn't over. Yet make sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe to the Great Indian AI podcast channel so you don't miss part 2, where we'll explore the long-term consequences of Amphan and delve deeper into the lessons learned from this devastating event. See you soon.
Sounds good. Welcome back to the Great Indian AI podcast channel.
As we continue our deep dive into Cyclone Amphan,
Right.
let's shift our focus to the long-term consequences.
Okay.
The ones that extend far beyond the immediate aftermath.
It's easy to get caught up in the initial shock and the images of destruction.
Right.
But the true impact of a disaster like this unfolds over years, sometimes even decades.
So let's unravel these long-term consequences. What aspects of life were most affected by Amphan in the long run?
Well, the economy took a major hit. Amphan caused billions of dollars in damage to infrastructure, agriculture, and various industries in both India and Bangladesh.
Wow.
Rebuilding from a blow like that takes enormous resources and a coordinated effort that stretches over years.
It's like trying to rebuild a house after a tornado, but on a massive scale.
That's a good analogy, and the destruction of crops and farmland had a ripple effect on food security,
Right.
especially for rural communities who rely on those crops for sustenance and income.
So beyond the immediate loss of crops, there's the long-term challenge of rebuilding the agricultural sector and ensuring food security for the future.
Precisely, and then there's the social impact.
Okay.
Amphan displaced millions of people,
Wow.
forcing them from their homes and communities. This displacement led to overcrowding, strained resources, and a heightened risk of disease outbreaks, all of which can have long-lasting effects.
It sounds like a disaster of this magnitude really exposes and amplifies existing vulnerabilities.
It does.
And I imagine the psychological impact is significant as well. Trauma is often an invisible wound.
It is. Experiencing a cyclone like this is deeply traumatic. The fear, the loss, the uncertainty, it all takes a toll on mental health,
Right.
especially for children and the elderly who may not have the coping mechanisms or support systems to process such a traumatic event.
So we're talking about potential long-term mental health needs that may not be immediately apparent, but require ongoing attention and support.
Exactly. Addressing these psychological needs is crucial for long-term recovery, yet it's often overlooked or overshadowed by the more immediate needs for food, shelter, and medical care.
It's clear that the long-term consequences are complex and multifaceted, touching on so many aspects of life. But amidst all these challenges, I remember reading about some incredible displays of human resilience.
Absolutely. We saw communities coming together, sharing whatever resources they had left, and supporting each other through the darkest of times.
Yeah.
It was truly inspiring.
Those stories of everyday heroes emerging from the wreckage of neighbors helping neighbors are what give me hope.
Me too. And it wasn't just individuals. Local volunteers, aid workers, and government agencies worked tirelessly to provide food, shelter, and medical assistance to those in need.
Yeah.
It really showcased the indomitable nature of the human spirit.
These acts of kindness and unity are a powerful reminder that even in the face of immense tragedy, humanity finds a way to persevere. It's a testament to our collective strength and our capacity for compassion.
It is now, while the immediate response to Amphan was commendable, it also revealed areas where we can improve our disaster preparedness.
Every disaster, no matter how tragic, offers valuable lessons. So what were some of the key takeaways from Amphan things that can help us prepare for future events?
One of the biggest takeaways was the critical importance of strengthening early warning systems.
Okay.
Accurate and timely forecasts are absolutely crucial for giving people enough time to prepare, evacuate if necessary, and take steps to protect themselves and their property.
I imagine even a few hours of extra warning could make a world of difference.
It could, and Amphan also highlighted the need to invest in more resilient infrastructure.
By resilient infrastructure, you mean buildings that can withstand stronger winds, power grids that are less vulnerable to disruptions, that sort of thing.
Exactly. Stronger buildings, sturdier power grids, better drainage systems. These are all investments that can significantly reduce the impact of future cyclones and other extreme weather events.
Right.
We need to shift from a reactive approach to a more proactive one,
Okay.
anticipating risks and taking steps to mitigate them.
It's about thinking long-term, not just about responding to the immediate crisis, but about building a more resilient future.
Precisely. And Amphan also underscored the need to address the underlying vulnerabilities that make certain communities more susceptible to the impacts of disasters.
You're talking about vulnerabilities like poverty, lack of access to healthcare, and inadequate housing.
Yes. These factors exacerbate the impact of any disaster, making recovery that much harder.
Right.
Investing in social safety nets, improving access to healthcare, and promoting sustainable development are all crucial steps in building long-term resilience.
Right.
Not just to cyclones, but to any kind of shock or crisis.
So it's a holistic approach. It's not just about physical infrastructure, but about strengthening communities from the ground up. It's about recognizing that true resilience comes from within, from the collective strength and preparedness of a community.
Exactly, and it's an ongoing process, a continuous cycle of learning, adapting, and investing in a safer future.
It's almost as if Amphan served as a wake-up call, a stark reminder that we live in a world increasingly vulnerable to the forces of nature, and we need to be prepared.
It was a wake-up call to reevaluate our priorities, to invest in preparedness, and to foster a culture of resilience at all levels of society.
And while we're talking about preparedness, we can't ignore the elephant in the room: climate change.
You're right, the link between extreme weather events and climate change is undeniable.
We've seen more intense storms, more frequent flooding, more extreme heat waves, all pointing toward the changing climate. So how does climate change fit into the story of Amphan?
Well, the scientific consensus is clear.
Okay.
Climate change is increasing the frequency and intensity of extreme weather events, including cyclones like Amphan.
So a warmer planet means more powerful storms.
In essence, yes. Warmer sea surface temperatures provide more energy for cyclones to develop and intensify, just like we saw with Amphan.
It's like adding fuel to the fire.
Exactly. And climate change also contributes to rising sea levels, which makes the impact of storm surges even more devastating. Coastal areas are particularly vulnerable to this double whammy of stronger storms and higher sea levels.
So while we can't definitively say that climate change caused Amphan, it certainly created the conditions that made such a powerful storm more likely.
Exactly. It's about understanding the complex interplay of factors, recognizing that human actions and a changing climate are influencing these events.
It's a call to action, isn't it? We can't just sit back and wait for the next disaster to strike. We need to take proactive steps to mitigate climate change, adapt to its effects, and build resilience into our systems and communities.
Absolutely. This is where individual actions, collective efforts, and policy changes all come into play.
Right.
We need a multi-pronged approach to tackle this challenge.
You've given us a lot to think about, and we're just scratching the surface here. For those who want to learn more about the aftermath of Cyclone Amphan and the lessons learned, join us for this video. Part 3 of this deep dive. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to the Great Indian AI podcast channel for more fascinating discussions like this one. Welcome back to the Great Indian AI podcast channel for the final part of our deep dive into Cyclone Amphan. We've covered a lot of ground, from the storm's rapid intensification to the devastating impacts it had on India and Bangladesh. We've also talked about the long-term consequences and the lessons we can learn to better prepare for future events.
It's been a really insightful discussion.
Yeah.
We've seen the destructive power of nature, but we've also seen the incredible resilience of the human spirit.
Absolutely. Now, let's focus on the aftermath of Amphan. It's one thing to talk about the immediate damage,
Right.
but the recovery process is a whole other story. It's a long and complex journey.
It is, and it's important to remember that recovery isn't just about rebuilding physical structures. It's about healing communities, restoring livelihoods, and fostering a sense of hope for the future.
So it's a multifaceted effort, recognizing that a cyclone's impact extends far beyond the immediate damage to buildings and infrastructure.
Exactly. It's about addressing the needs of the people who have been affected both physically and emotionally.
Let's start with the immediate relief efforts. I remember seeing those images of rescue workers navigating flooded streets, distributing food and water, and setting up temporary shelters. It was a massive undertaking.
It was both the Indian and Bangladeshi governments, along with numerous aid organizations and countless volunteers, really stepped up to provide emergency relief.
But as we discussed earlier, the ongoing pandemic created a whole other layer of complexity for these relief efforts.
Absolutely. Resources were already stretched thin because of the pandemic, and then you have this massive disaster that displaces millions of people.
Right.
It created logistical challenges and heightened the risk of disease outbreaks in crowded shelters.
It sounds like a logistical nightmare trying to manage a natural disaster of this scale while also dealing with a global health crisis.
It was unprecedented, but it also forced people to get creative and adapt. Relief workers had to implement strict hygiene protocols, distribute masks and hand sanitizer, and modify shelter arrangements to allow for social distancing as much as possible.
So it was a delicate balancing act, ensuring the safety and well-being of those affected by the cyclone, while also mitigating the spread of the virus.
Exactly. And while those immediate relief efforts were essential, the real challenge lies in the long and arduous process of rebuilding and recovery.
It's like putting the pieces back together after a devastating earthquake, but on a much larger scale. And as you said, it's not just about rebuilding physical structures, it's about rebuilding lives and livelihoods.
That's a good way to put it. The recovery process involves restoring essential services like electricity and clean water, rehabilitating damaged infrastructure, and providing financial assistance to those who lost their homes and their means of making a living.
It's a massive undertaking that requires coordination across different levels of government involvement, from NGOs and international aid organizations, and most importantly, the participation of the communities themselves.
You're absolutely right, and this process is made even more challenging when you consider that many of the areas hit by Amphan were already struggling with poverty and limited access to healthcare.
So the cyclone exacerbated existing vulnerabilities, making the recovery process even more difficult for those who are already marginalized.
It did, and this really highlights the importance of addressing these underlying issues, not just in the context of disaster response, but as part of a broader strategy for sustainable development. We need to invest in building resilient communities that are better equipped to withstand shocks, whether they're caused by natural disasters, economic downturns, or public health emergencies.
It's about taking a holistic approach, recognizing that true resilience is about more than just physical infrastructure. It's about social cohesion, economic opportunity, and a sense of community.
I completely agree, and that brings us to a really important aspect of recovery community resilience.
Community resilience, can you explain what that means?
It's the ability of a community to withstand, adapt, and recover from adversity.
Okay.
It's about having strong social networks, a sense of shared purpose, and the capacity to bounce back from setbacks.
So it's about more than just physical strength. It's about the collective strength of the community, the ability to come together and support each other in times of need.
Exactly. And we saw some remarkable examples of community resilience in the aftermath of Amphan communities, came together sharing resources, helping each other rebuild homes, and offering emotional support to those who had lost loved ones.
Those stories are truly inspiring. They remind us that even in the darkest of times, there's always hope. There's always the human spirit shining through.
It's a testament to the power of community, the strength we find in each other when we face adversity together.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Cyclone Amphan, what are the key takeaways? What are the lessons we can learn from this devastating event?
I think one of the biggest takeaways is the importance of proactive preparedness.
Right.
We can't just wait for disasters to happen. We need to anticipate them and take steps to mitigate their impact.
That means investing in early warning systems, building resilient infrastructure, and addressing the underlying vulnerabilities that make certain communities more susceptible to harm.
Exactly. And we also need to recognize that climate change is a reality, and it's making these extreme weather events more frequent and more intense.
It's a call to action for all of us, individuals, communities, and governments, to work together to address climate change, adapt to its effects, and build a more sustainable future.
Absolutely. It's about taking responsibility, making informed choices, and demanding action from our leaders.
Well said. It's been a fascinating and thought-provoking journey exploring the story of Cyclone Amphan. Thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope you found it informative and engaging. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to the Great Indian AI podcast channel for more insightful deep dives into topics that matter.
Take care, everyone.